So, welcome to the special episode of Financially Speaking, a series of conversations powered by IndiaFirst Life. Myself, Peuli Das, Chief and Appointed Actuary at IndiaFirst Life, is your host today. I have been working in this organization for over 6 years now. Personally, I relate to the topic I am hosting today by virtue of being a mother of a 10-year-old daughter. I realize the importance of a dad's contribution towards emotional and intellectual well being. And I don't know, how much it means as a support to me, a working professional like me. So I think we need to have a round of introduction here. And this event is a special occasion of Father's Day. We are having this podcast. And we are fortunate to have both of you here who are new age fathers. And let me welcome both of you, Nadir Kanthawala and Peter Kotikalapudi, on Financially Speaking, conversations powered by India First Life. Nadir is professionally has been part of the media industry for close to 16 years. He has a mix of video production and digital advertisings in his bag. Apart from this, he also produces, which I already mentioned, the well-known podcast Pops in a Pod with Peter here, who is also, we are fortunate to have you here also, Peter. Peter is a marketing professional with wholesome 10 years of experience, and both of you are based in Mumbai. Nadir, can I start by asking you some questions and then I'll just move on to Peter?
Sure, Peuli. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting
Yeah.
us on India First Insurance Podcast. I think it's a fantastic medium to have a conversation on various topics, not just parenting, but there's so many things that can come and integrate and great initiatives. So right up front, I would like to congratulate everyone and the team that this is a fantastic initiative, and we are honored to be a part of this. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Oh, thank you so much too.
I'm telling you, I'm putting this up front. You said extraordinary dads. Both our wives will be listening right now and be like, yeah, sure, extraordinary dads. But I'm telling you, like, thanks so much again for that great introduction. It feels nice to hear because for both of us, we're doing this, like you said, along with our jobs, right? So
Right.
we just have that vision of going ahead. We never kind of realize, and to be honest, there was never that ambition to kind of be out there or be. We were just doing what we felt. So thanks again for that introduction.
Thank you so much. And we would love to hear from you as well. No, I'm very sure that you are extraordinary because the reason you could communicate, you can actually get my attention when you first started off by saying that these are the things you do. Those are just bang on. Nadir, you can start by telling about you and your family and obviously your children. I think it's like your daughter. I have already met her. And how did you first like special moments? Like how did you feel about holding her for the first time?
It's actually a very this is a story that everyone's heard. To talk on a corporate medium like this, it's a little uncanny. But I remember that day very vividly because see, we are very planned parents, right? Both my wife and I, and it was so planned that we knew exactly what time we had to reach the hospital, what needed to be done. We had a timetable set. I knew my responsibilities. My wife obviously was in labor, so she was I think most of the time screaming and trying not to feel the pain, and there's very little that I can do about that, right? Up until that point, I was very relaxed, right? I was like, okay, we've got this. There's nobody, so it's just me and my wife. My parents didn't come, her parents didn't come. They showed up only after my daughter was born, and I'm just relaxed. I'm like, it's a nice small hospital. It's not even a hospital, it's more of a nursing home, very private, very residential, homely feel. So anyway, so she was having a contraction, she was going into labor, and I'm just there. I didn't have much of a role to play, so I go down to pick up some food because I'm very hungry. I haven't eaten, because of the whole excitement and the anxiety, so I just buy some rolls for myself. I just didn't feel like eating that roll in the reception area, so I go to the room where my wife is lying on the bed waiting for to deliver, and she's still a couple of hours away. And I was like, yeah, it's my room, so I might as well sit here and eat. And I was eating, and there she's kind of screaming and shouting in the corner, and I was just kind of drowning all of that out, because I was like, okay, let me just let her be. I'm going to quickly eat in peace, and I'll see if she needs any help. And I'm eating, and suddenly she just starts screaming, and it's like, can you just get out of the room? I can smell the roll. It's very, very, uncomforting. Just leave. And then the nurse just barges in. And it's like, क्या कर रहे हो आप? Please यहाँ से निकलो. Madam को तकलीफ हो रहा है. I was like, I'm sorry. And I got kicked out basically of my own room. And so everything was all cool and theek hai. But then I think it was the point when my daughter was born, and it was so quick, right? It was just really fast. By the time I got into my scrubs and I was all ready, I just entered and she was born. And I think at that time, that moment, it was just very numbing for me as an experience, because to see a third person joining us, right, that nothing is going to prepare you for that moment, because it is so magical. It's not possible to describe that feeling unless and until you actually feel it. I think by that time I had lost all my senses and sensibilities, because when my daughter was born and when I saw her, the doctor was cradling her, and the first thing I said is, "Oh my God, she's crying. Is she okay?" And the doctor just looks at me very, deadpan. It's like, "Yeah, it's a good thing. The baby's supposed to cry. I mean, which means it's normal." It's like, "Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, she's supposed to cry. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, yeah, parenting 101." When I held my daughter, I was like, "Oh my God, that's it. I mean, this is it. I think I have made a massive achievement in my life, and here she is, and I'm going to guard this child, for as long as I can." And something just opens up, in your mind, your body, and your heart, and you can never close those doors again, ever. And that's how I felt when I first saw my daughter.
Wow, so what a beautiful way of putting it as well. So, Peter, you wanted to share something. I'm very sure you will have loads of memories too.
Actually, mine was completely the opposite of Nadir. Mine has no dramatics, nothing. The reason being is because this involves a course. Now, compared to Nadir, I went to an actual hospital. It was a larger thing. One of the things that they forgot to tell me, right, is that there's a course that dads need to do before they enter the delivery room. When similar to Nadir's wife, my wife was in labor and stuff like that. So an hour into it, I knew also that, okay, I'm going to be prepared. So I'm kind of mentally preparing myself to enter the delivery room. And as I'm kind of telling them, hey, get the doctor, all of that is happening, I go and there's like this stern nurse. Every hospital has at least one stern nurse. And she just looks at me and says, have you done the course? So I said, what course are you talking about? She said, no, the dads are supposed to do a course. And now this is some of the things that I feel that nobody tells you about, right? Like when you're preparing, right, you'll read books, people will tell you about this. No one tells you that sometimes certain hospitals have a course. I think in this next half an hour, I went through all kinds of emotions. And this was probably the toughest negotiation I did, because my wife and I had clearly agreed and we had looked forward to this for months, that, I was going to be there in the delivery room and she really wanted me to be there. So I went from negotiating hard to saying, you cannot do this. There's no course. Show me a letter. Where is it written in the rules? To literally after that going, okay, please. This is my first child. I don't know like whether we're gonna see this opportunity anytime soon. But nothing seemed to work with that nurse. But the thing about it, right, with my story, the only dramatic part is when, like, so because my wife was delivering and they didn't allow me, I said I'll sit in her room. So I'm waiting in their room. And after my wife delivers, the nurse comes and says, you know what, you have a son. My family was there. We were all overwhelmed. So they said, you know what, you want to go see your son? So I walk in there. And now my wife's gynecologist, who we've been meeting every month for almost 8, 9 months, who knows me quite well, suddenly looks at me and says, why didn't you come to the delivery room? So I said, because I didn't do the course. And then she looks at me and says these words, and I still can hear it in my ears when I think about it. She said, I told them to call you in. Why didn't you come in? And at that point, you're so overwhelmed. I'm holding my son in my arms. And I just forgot it. I was like, forget the nurse, forget everything. I have my son in my arms over here. But yeah, that's my story for my wife's delivery.
No, wow. I mean, it's a happy story. So it's all is well, which ends well, kind of a thing. Like you had a hassle some start, and you were excited. Nobody was like just letting you in, and then you kind of held your baby, and you felt that that was just overwhelming. Just coming to the roles of the fathers, and how do you think that the style of parenting is changing over time, and what is the relationship you shared with your father? I know, Peter, you told me some bit of it already, but I think you can explain a little bit more about it. And yeah, this is a platform. I think even I can share like what has changed in you, which was not there in your father. Also, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, so to be honest, right, one of the things I must say, and I'm ever grateful to my dad for, is that he sets the bar so high for me, right? I remember just to go before becoming a dad, I remember he was one of the first people I shared the news that my wife was pregnant. And I told him, hey, were you ever like, scared or afraid? Or did you have any moments like when mom was pregnant with me? And he said, about what? Because my dad has always been that person that who's very calm. You never kind of see all that's happening at the back. And that's how I always remember my dad. My dad has always been there. Coming to his parenting style, because the reason I say he set the bar so hard, I've always seen my dad doing stuff for me. So the thing is, I grew up in the Gulf, and both my parents worked. So we did have help, but my mom used to leave for work before my dad. So my earliest memories are of my dad, getting me ready for school, giving me a bath, feeding me breakfast, because my mom had already left. Uh, so when, the responsibility came on me, it was that, okay, my dad did such a great job. How do I do better than him? What can I do that he's kind of already done for me? And that's why I keep saying that I'm grateful because he set that right example for me, and that's what I'm trying to do. Like my aim is that if I'm as good a dad as he is, then I kind of have made it. If I exceed, then wow, my son is really, really lucky.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I'm really happy to know that your dad used to spend a lot of time with you. And so, Nadir, over to you. So, you have to share about your dad as well.
We had a slightly more patriarchal setup at home. Granddad, dad. I think with me things have changed drastically also because I think I married a very firebrand woman, so that really makes a difference. But my dad was, typical dad that you read about. Strong and
Hmm.
very headstrong about certain things, will never show his softer side. So I never saw like the softer side of my dad. I think I can easily say that I've actually never seen my dad cry. So that's the kind of quintessential qualities that my dad had. So he would always be one of those people who would kind of drive you forward, right? How many marks did you get, and who came first, and who came second? He was that guy. So for me, I think the softer aspects obviously came from my mom, who was and continues to be a homemaker, and my dad used to run a business, so he was busy throughout. So for me, I think my dad was always kind of the weekend parent. He used to take us out a lot, and I think that's how I associate my father. But I think the most important thing that I associate with my dad is the fact that he taught me a lot about finance, right? When it and the most important thing that I learned from him is the importance of savings.
Now, how has it been for you, Peter? So, maybe I can ask you. That is, how was it for you, and what kind of advice you received from your father, and when it came to all these matters related to the financial planning?
So the thing is, because both my parents worked, right? I actually, one of the first things I understood from a very young age, and considering both of them, yeah, they were much younger than I did. They moved to the Gulf before I was born. So they instilled that, strong work ethic, that, you need to really work hard. And my parents both, I must give credit to my mom here also, always told the reason why we moved, the reason why we did this is so that you have a better life, but never take for granted everything that you get. For a long time, I took that for granted. I didn't understand that, the computer I wanted or something that I wanted. I always, as kids, you always think, why can't I have an iPhone? Why do all my friends have an iPhone? You don't understand the value of money. And that's something that once I became much older, I realized. Unfortunately, it happened when I started working and realizing how much money, the value of money is. In my house, both my parents kind of managed the money. That's something that I took in as an example when I got married. That, such decisions are never made alone. It's always done with your partner. But coming to a very specific example of financial advice from my dad, and I'm sure when he hears this, he'll remember it very well, is he told me, my son, I'm telling you one thing, and this was just the day before I left home to live alone and start working. He said, don't ever get a credit card. And now I'm one of
Okay.
those guys who very blindly listens to my dad. So I said, you know what, my dad's saying it. So I'm never questioning it, never asking him. And trust me, I think it was for almost 7 years, I never owned a credit card. Because one of the things I always learned from my parents also, and this is a very, I think, typical middle class mentality, is always live within your means. One of the things they wanted to extend to me is the moment you have a credit card, you feel that, you can overspend, or you kind of are tempted to spend, but never realize that, hey, how do I pay that back, right? And that's where you kind of fall in that trap. That's one thing. When I got married also, my wife and I, when she also works, when you have a double income house, you're suddenly like very tempted to overspend or splurge. But those kind of lessons always come back to you that, hey, you know what, we need to plan for something, or we need to save for something. So I'm really grateful for those lessons.
Something very similar happened with me also. Like my dad would always tell me about paisa ki ahmiyat jano, and and that kind of remains with you. Because they're very heavy words, right? And it's attached to, as I
Absolutely.
said, it's a value ultimately, because you need to earn for it. And I remember as a kid, I used to, whenever we went out, I always noticed, and I was very young, I must be 5 6 years old, and my dad would, whenever we went out for dinner, meals, whatever, he would always take the bill, fold it neatly, and put it in his pocket. And then I just asked him, I said, why are you doing this? He's like, no, so that I can kind of, and obviously he couldn't explain taxes to me at that point in time, right? So he just said, no, I just have to kind of submit to the bank, and then I kind of get it back. And I was like, oh my God, that's how you get so much money. I just have to put a bank account. That's how I get all the money. I don't have to work at all. So I think he kind of did a disservice to me by explaining how a bank, well, kind of works. And then my mom is like, no, no, that's not how it works. That's not how a bank works. You've got to work for it. You need to kind of do things. And,
Right.
once you start handling your own money, you'll sort of understand.
Wow. So, I mean, I think that's quite enlightening as well. I mean, you already inculcated the entire financial discipline in this financially speaking, podcast. So that's the essence of it, and I'm so glad to hear. So, do you think that there is any similarity or difference as to the way you approach, the financial planning, and when it comes to, planning finances with respect to your kid, or in general, from what your fathers did?
Yeah, so one more thing I wanted to add, right? And this I wish and I hope, if educators are listening, right, they make a difference. I mean, it makes a difference in their life. A lot of things with regards to finance we never learn in school. Taxes, like Nadir said, credit score. I mean, it's so important. A lot of us are now at a younger age taking loans, right? And you have bad credit scores, then what do you do? You're really stuck. So that is one thing, and I definitely want to inculcate that in my son, like kind of explain to him. Like, I had an uncle who told me, and he gave me like a ballpark figure that, from every salary you earn, put aside like 30 to 40%, and that will really help you in the future. But I wish I took that advice, because for the first 6 months, when you're living in Europe all alone, and it's so easy to travel nearby, yes, I did save, but not exactly 30, 40%. But the temptation is there, right? You want to travel. You don't see the bigger picture, you don't see it ahead. Uh, but I must be grateful at the same time. I have an aunt who kind of really guided me when I moved to India. And my first pay raise I had, she just told me, hey, here's a piece of paper, sign it. And now, because I trust her so well, I just signed it. And I was like, okay, what it is. And she said, oh, by the way, that's a recurring deposit. The raise that you got every month, that's going into your recurring deposit. And I said, but why? She said, why do you need that money anyway? You're fine with your current salary. Why don't you start saving it? And of course, that initial 5 6 months you feel that pinch, but like at the end of a year, 2 years, when you see that money, you're just like, hey, wow, that's money like I put aside, right? You don't kind of realize that. And I think when you see the compounding, now of course the interest levels are no longer what they used to be, but the power of compounding, I think if we realize at a much younger age, and if that's something we can tell our kids, right, it completely changes your approach towards spending. It changes your approach to what money is really, right?
The most important lesson, and I always kind of go back to my dad for any kind of financial advice, at least traditionally speaking. But what he did for me, and what I'm always thankful to, is the fact that as I was growing up, my father put it in practice of offloading certain house expenses onto me, right? So when I started making money, when I got into the workforce, and when I started making my own money, there's this habit, right? When you come from an upper middle class family where your father has a business, there's, you're living comfortable. I've lived a privileged life, so I will make no qualms of that. You tend to get a little too settled and comfortable, right? अच्छा चलो अभी गाड़ी निकाल के चलते, पेट्रोल भरना है, अरे डैडी का अकाउंट है पेट्रोल पंप पे, let's just put your name, sign it, and then he'll pay for it at the end of the month. He never let that happen to me. He made sure that I paid for my own fuel. And over the years, what happened was that both my wife and I have been contributing to the house for the longest time, and I have been doing it since a very young age. So today, it doesn't come to me as a shock, like if my dad is almost retiring, and it won't be like, अच्छा भाई मेरे तो पैसे खत्म हो गए अभी तुम चलाओ अपना घर, and suddenly it'll come to me as a shock, right? लेकिन मैं कहाँ से लेके आऊँ इतने सारे पैसे, मुझे नहीं आता ये सब करने. So I think I'm extremely grateful to the fact that he used that journey, set milestones, and said, okay, first you have to pay for your own fuel. Now, since you use the AC, you've got to pay 1/3 of the electricity bill, and eventually now I end up paying the entire electricity bill. So that's something that he kept doing. So it didn't come to me as a blow, that okay, I've got to manage this house, and now how do I do it, because I have attained a certain lifestyle. So that is something I'm extremely grateful, and that is one thing I am most definitely going to pass it on to my daughter, because I think kids need to understand, as Peter also rightly said, right, that in you need to be taught all of this in school, right? Maybe not too early, but eventually it has to be a part of your curriculum, right? What are savings, basic understanding of taxes, what does the Indian government do when it comes to taxes, and why do you have to pay taxes, how does it help in nation building? It's important for the child to understand that.
Absolutely. Just coming on to the parents, because you often do that in the podcast. So maybe some that will be very relevant for you for the podcast as well. So what is the one piece of advice which you would like to give the fathers or the parents, and with regard to the financial planning and upbringing of your children, which will be, I mean, who are of will be a different generation altogether. So Nadir.
I think the key word in the term financial planning is planning. Not too many people realize the importance of planning. I'm extremely like a planned person. My life has an Excel sheet, right? So, and that's how I like to live my life. Call it boring, call it too strategic. It doesn't matter. That's how I like to progress, right? I like to see things beforehand, saying that, acha, in the next 1 year, this is the goal. Let's kind of work towards it. So when it comes to financial planning, I think one thing that I can say is, which I think, Peoli, even you mentioned that your dad was a little risk averse, and I think so was my dad, and probably a lot of other dads in our generation. One thing I would like to tell this new generation, new parents, is the fact that it's okay to take risks. I
Yeah.
think you should take risks, because if you're going to live a very harbored life, and if you are going to be very नहीं करते यार, प्रॉपर्टी में पैसा नहीं डालते, डूब गया तो कल की बिल्डिंग गिर गई तो, like, they will think of the worst, right? Don't
Yeah.
do that. It's okay to take risks. It's all right. Think long term. If you think हाँ यार ये एक XYZ stock खरीद लेते हैं, because I've been reading so many, this stock has become 1,000% multi bagger in 1 year. If you do that, then you will be the worst person to lose out on everything. So think long term, and hedge your bets on everything. I think insurance is by far one of the most powerful instruments out there, right? And whether it's health, medical, anything, it's a huge cushion, a great safety net for all of us. And I would urge the new generation to kind of invest in insurance, whether it's term, whether it's life insurance, or whether it's bonus related, whatever it is. It's always good to park your money over there, and the rest depends on your appetite to kind of spend, whether it's on mutual funds, or whether it's on your gold, sovereign bonds, or physical gold itself, whatever, property. I think that spread needs to be there. We've all heard that old adage, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because
Absolutely.
you'll end up losing everything.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've learned from my dad. I've learned from my mom as well, that always try out new things. But the one thing I think that I picked up all by myself, because of the friends around me and the kind of company I kept, is the fact that, yeah, it's very important to take risks, and that's something I would want to leave the new parents with.
Nadir, I mean, so nice to hear from you. Again, we are probably relating and connecting because it's a like-mindedness which I can see. That is, you have to take risk and you have to diversify, okay, and you have to have all sorts of investments because you do not know which you will need, and that's the essence of it. Don't put everything in the same basket, but just spread it out. And that's a myth of investment. That's a myth of a very financially disciplined approach of towards investment. So I really love it. Peter, maybe you can also relent
Yeah.
on some of those as well. Yeah.
So, I mean, to just kind of put a term to what Nadir is saying is, right, it's diversification. I mean, a lot of people, especially when it came to stocks. So, one of the things I learned from my finance professor while I was doing my MBA was, like Nadir said, it's diversification and long term. We get too caught up, right? Everyone watched Scam 1992. Everyone, Big Bull banna hai, all of that. I'm sure, like in the last year, there have been more people who've kind of got encouraged through that show than
The role of
anything
media,
else.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So it plays a very
And Peter,
important.
don't forget crypto.
Yeah, 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 and cryptocurrency. I mean, like everybody is kind of, because I guess it's just the nature of having time on your hands, the influence of media. Uh, but coming back to what Nadir is saying, right? One thing, and I'm only going to talk from my example and my wife example, is that we planned, and while Nadir says he planned, right? We planned the month after we got married. Like we already had started putting money aside from then. We didn't know when we were going to have a child. We had a range, but we already started planning. And at that time, because we had just got married, we wanted to splurge, buy stuff. People had given us gifts and all, but we said, no, let's do this because when we have our child, at that time, because when I looked at it, right, I know that I studied abroad and I want my child to have that kind of education, right? You always want to have at least your child to have an on par, if not more. So I said, if I want to put him in a particular school, if I want him to have an education abroad, I need to start planning right now, like not when he's like going to school, then say, ki, haan, 10 saal hai. So I think that's one of those things that, if you plan much in advance, people think that, uh, we'll start planning from the moment I hear something or see something. But the planning is, 2 years or 5 years before that. You need to just keep in there. And yeah, insurance is great. I mean, I've been a big proponent of insurance in there. It really helps. And I think in times like this, medical insurance, especially,
Absolutely.
uh, considering how the situation is, I think medical insurance is something not only just for you, your immediate family itself. I think that really helps you. You never know where you may need it, right?
So I think all these thoughts together are evolving, and I'm very happy to see that you're also taking care of this in your in the parenting podcast because these are useful tips, and actually sometimes it becomes very complex. So the more you hear, the better. Yeah, because it
True.
kind of gives you informed, and it helps you to get some endorsement, okay, on what you do, and that probably it's a very good tips for because even today, like. Even if everything is on the platter, people will come and say for tips, okay, so you never know, those things should be there, and I think that those are very valuable and useful for all the people who stay tuned to your podcast as well and who are listening to the financially speaking podcast right now as well. So I think we are towards the end of the session now, and thank you very much, Nadir and Peter, for joining us today in the podcast. And your insights have been very, very, very useful, and I'm very sure that your podcast, the pops in the pod, are going to get a mark and make a mark amongst other the fathers who are multitasking between work and family. And wish both of you a very happy Father's Day from India First Life. Stay
Thank
safe and be financially secure, or continue to be financially secure, and like continue to create happy memories with your children. For all the audience, share your thoughts for today's episode and stay tuned for the next.